It's another GPS Live for the week of March 8th. Jonathan and I are back to talk about cybersecurity news. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're joining us live here on the show on LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook or wherever you are, if you are joining us live, go ahead and drop a comment. Let us know where you're coming from. Let us know how your week's been. Let us know if there's anything interesting that you've been tracking in the world of cybersecurity, because maybe we'll dump a story real quick and talk about what's interesting to you. But we have some really cool stories to cover. And if you're joining us, after the fact in an on demand, thank you again for that time. And again, let us know what you think of the stories as we're going through them. And as you're watching, and we will read those comments and talk about them later. I'm trying to get into it because we got some big stuff to cover this week. So my name's Tristan Morris.
There's a ton. I'm so sorry. I cut you off, Tristan. Begin again.
No, you're fine. No, we're not beginning again.
Well, thanks for joining. I'm Jonathan Zinger. And like you mentioned, this is the week of March 8th. So roll that zinger.
Roll that zinger. So yeah, we have a lot of good stuff to cover this week. But before we get into it, we do need to go ahead and say that the views and opinions that Jonathan and I express are our own and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of GuidePoint Security officially. Yeah, we are ready to jump into some really.
Sorry, I'm all over the place today. There's been a ton of news going on. This has been one heck of an active week on the internet. So
it's been active, and we were actively deciding up until 10 minutes ago which stories we were going to cover, because there was some good stuff.
Well, let's jump right into it then.
Let's jump right into it. So our first story comes to us from Bleeping Computer. This one is about the prolific ransomware gang BlackCat, also known as Alpha, styled as AlpV. These guys have been up to quite a bit of activity recently, which you can see and track in the GuidePoint Research and Intelligence team reports that come out every month, every quarter, and an annual report. BlackCat has been pretty active for quite some time. In fact, we have another Grit report coming out just next week, and we're going to have more guests from the Grit team on next week's show. But what's going on? So we've got here no honor among thieves, Jonathan. So what's going on with BlackCat?
Yeah, there's a number of things here, and we have to kind of position how the different players are involved here. Obviously, we understand that victims exist, but BlackCat or Alfie is operating as a ransomware as a service. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're the ones hacking into systems all the time. They often, offer up these platforms to what they call affiliates, or people that do their dirty work, but use their tool set. And that's kind of what's going on here. Is the folks apparently that did the dirty work and are breaking into customers, including a number of different healthcare sectors, are now coming back and saying that BlackCat didn't pay us our landing fee, essentially, of getting their tool on somewhere and successfully pulling a ransom payout. And this has turned into a number of events, including BlackCat potentially disappearing and going dark with all the money and not sharing it with, these parties that are supposed to get cashed out for helping.
Yeah, it's an interesting turn of events. So there are high profile attacks like this all the time, and what we typically see a lot, what there's a lot of discussion about when it comes to ransomware in recent years, has been the fact that a lot of these organizations operate like businesses. Particularly like Lockbit is well known, and we've said this a lot of times on the show, well known for operating like a business, and really kind of trying to build a reputation for themselves about how they operate. For example, some of them have very strict codes of quote unquote ethics, right? That say you are or are not allowed to attack certain types of targets. Things like, hey, don't take down critical life-saving services, things like that, right? They don't want to be responsible for that. And so they try and uphold these reputations very, very stringently. And in this case, though, what's been happening more and more recently is these groups are pivoting towards ransomware as a service offerings, right? Meaning that anyone can come in, express an interest in utilizing their particular form of ransomware, and like you said, Jonathan, becoming an affiliate, and they give the ransomware group a cut of whatever it is that they make off of the ransomware. Or I guess you could say that the ransomware group gives them a cut of
Mhm.
that
They,
final.
they handle the payment, so there's this whole your portion, my portion negotiation.
Yeah, there's an interesting legal level there. I think that's kind of funny. That goes beyond just the fact that this is an illegal activity, but into the fact that you're the provider of the service and the payment processor for said service. I'm pretty sure that there's some legality around that as far as businesses are concerned. But yeah, it's interesting here that this affiliate landed an incredibly large attack, with an extremely large ransom, but is now claiming that as soon as that ransom was paid, Alfie slash BlackCat immediately kind of stonewalled them, cut them out of the group, and has now just disappeared entirely. So what happened is on Friday, it looks like. I think this is saying last Friday. Yeah, last Friday.
Mhm.
What it looked like was the negotiation sites for Black Hat and Alfie were still active, but the leak blog had been taken down. So this is a common tactic among ransomware groups now, right? The fact that they will double and triple extort their victims, and so this leak blog was a way for them to say, "Hey, we have your information, we have your stuff. You're not paying up on time, or you're not negotiating the way we want to. So we're going to put a little bit more pressure on you by leaking some of that data." So that had been down, but the negotiation site was still up. But then, as of the beginning of this week, the negotiation site was also taken down, and a message was posted in Russian on probably. I think they're saying here that it was on Telegram. Um, Potentially, or potentially on one of their sites. I'm a little unclear on the wording in the article here, because it says it's on the messaging platform, which would usually refer to something like Telegram or something like that for one of these groups. But a short status message in Russian basically said everything is off, we've decided it, and then followed up by the characters GG, which generally means good game. So it looks like potentially Alfie and Black Hat have just vanished and said, "Hey, this is a big enough payout. We're going to go down. We're going to completely either leave, but very likely rebrand and emerge as something new."
Yeah, and it's kind of their MO. Now, between what you see here within our own grit reports, but just looking at a brief history of where uh, Black Cat, Alfie kind of came from. If we remember a couple of years back with stuff like the Colonial Pipeline, that was a group called Darkside, and then Darkside was then rebranded again, right? There was a number of different things. They were up and operational. They lost all of their infrastructure. They decided to go dark, rebrand, and then there was Black Matter. Black Matter was then shut down by authorities, from pressure from authorities, and then kind of goes dark again. And then we saw them finally re-operationalize back in 2022 as Alfie or Black Hat. And start expanding their ransomware as a service platform again. And so this almost kind of plays right in line with what we see from this particular threat actor of either some kind of incident happening within the organization, a law enforcement takedown or pressure, or in this case, it sounds like taking off with a large sum of 350 Bitcoins. Go quiet for a little bit, kind of reintegrate, and we will see. I feel like we will see this particular organization back online again under a new moniker in a short period of time, just based on the history of how they operate.
Absolutely, like they're going to come back. This is a rebranding, shutting down and rebranding is a or splintering, as the grit team would call, is another tactic. So rebranding is when your entire operation goes away and then you just come back as something new. And splintering is another option, which is when the main organization stays there, but kind of the brain drain of the main folks or some of the better folks from that organization splits off to create a subgroup that is still potentially linked back to the original group, whether it's through tactics or messaging or anything like that. Those types of tactics are often undertaken as a way to kind of escape scrutiny, a little bit, right? So while there are traceable links, like, hey, this encryptor is the same as that last group that already shut down, it is a way to get out of the spotlight for just a little bit, and reemerge and establish yourself again before that spotlight finds you again. And people really link you back. So I'm sure this group is going to be back, and they may not even rebrand at all. This may simply be a way for them to shuffle things around in the background, because this attack did get a lot of heat. It did get a lot of attention. So they may be shutting down so that they can do things like move around their infrastructure, change out encryptors, things like that. Without having to try and launch that in place. So we'll see. We'll be tracking this one pretty closely. I'll be very curious to see the Grit report that comes out next week. Won't be covering this because it's going to be about what happened last month, but the quarterly report for this first quarter of the year will almost certainly cover what is happening here and any updates that come along. And we're going to ask them about it next week too. But that leads us into our next story. I think we should probably jump into our next one. This one's pretty interesting, considering the group of players that is involved here. But you may remember it feels like a few years ago at this point, a couple of years ago, but it might have just been last year, and time is just strange. But the NSO Group, a foreign hacking group that developed the Pegasus spyware that was going after WhatsApp and being used to target individuals through WhatsApp and monitor their comings and goings and their conversations, is back in the news as a U.S. court has now ordered NSO Group to hand over the Pegasus spyware code to WhatsApp. This is kind of interesting. So, Jonathan, what's happening here?
Yeah, so this is kind of a new approach to something that's happening regarding developers of backdoors, ODAs, and more or less spyware for nation states. And they've received a court order to the point where now the developer of this spyware must basically show through source code or functionality the victim software group, in this case being Meta, more specifically their WhatsApp product. And so imagine it this way. If you were to find a bug in WhatsApp, and especially take it to another level and turn that into a marketable product, the courts have basically said, you need to now show WhatsApp how you're doing this and what's happening, and make them aware of how this bug is working. And this is kind of a very different approach versus something where we maybe see like bug bounties, where individuals are incentivized to share their security findings with large developers. There are still a number of organizations that tend to take these ODAs or bugs that they discover and use them more in a nefarious manner. In this case, a business actually developing spyware software to be used by countries around the world.
Yeah, and so this originated. Yeah, this was a couple of years ago. My sense of time is all screwed up because this lawsuit was filed in October 2019. So it goes very far back. Yeah, so the lawsuit was filed by Facebook or Meta in 2019. Because NSO Group, or alleging that NSO Group was using their infrastructure, Meta's infrastructure, to deliver this, and that was materially damaging to them. So to distribute the spyware to approximately like 1,400 mobile devices between April and May, which is a wide net to cast in such a short amount of time. But it was leveraging a critical buffer overflow bug that happened within the voice call functionality inside of WhatsApp that allowed Pegasus to simply place a call and infect that receiving WhatsApp device when the call was placed. It also allowed them to delete the call logs. So the call would come in. It doesn't have to like complete or anything like that, right? As long as the call gets there. And that buffer overflow bug is triggered, they were able to then jump onto that phone and then delete the fact that they had ever called. So this could happen to you at 2 a.m. You would never know. And then you're infected with this spyware. And this was used to target journalists and I believe some politicians and a lot of high profile individuals And this led to some fairly large, I think, news stories and cases as people discovered, hey, I've been infected by this.
Yeah.
By this
Now,
WhatsApp.
do not forget, NSO Group has been sanctioned by the US back in 2021 for developing and supplying this type of cyber weapon or cyber warfare tooling to foreign governments. In fact, they do call out, as you just mentioned, these tools were used to maliciously target government officials, journalists, business people, activists, academics, and embassy workers. So,
Yeah.
a lot of people of either government relations or influence in their communities.
Yeah, so this court order, right, is a huge step for Meta, and a huge victory for Meta here, as it says, hey, hand over all of your source code, show us exactly how this works and exactly what you're doing. Now, interestingly, it does not require that NSO Group produce information concerning the background server. The background server architecture of how they're doing this, stating that Meta will, or in WhatsApp will be able to glean that same exact information once they have the full source code. That they should be able to use that source code to fully reverse engineer this and kind of figure out exactly how this is happening and stop it from happening in the future. So this is a very positive step forward, but it also does not require that NSO Group divulge their list of clients. Which is troubling, because not knowing who exactly was using this software, who was using this this flaw in order to go after these high-profile individuals, that's a fairly large piece of the puzzle, right? Being able to figure out who exactly was using this, so that these people can get on with their lives, right? If you are infected with this, not knowing specifically which organization, government, individual is targeting you, leaves you very open and very vulnerable. So unfortunately, the people who have been victims of this in the past and don't already know who it was that was targeting them have to continue with that caution and with that suspicion of what may or may not have happened, in their life, and who may have access to this data. But it is a huge critical step forward that they have to provide this code. Because who knows? Stranger things have happened within the realm of cybersecurity, right? We just saw the takedown over the last couple weeks of major ransomware infrastructure by essentially, grabbing onto expired infrastructures and being able to backdoor your way into the infrastructure of these large groups. So perhaps gaining access to this source code will somehow give Meta and WhatsApp the ability to see, down the line, who it was that was actually doing this, or to watch in the future for when this type of thing happens, so that they can immediately grab, where is this coming from? This is the person that is trying to execute this right now.
Absolutely. Um, as I mentioned before, right? These types of organizations do exist around the world, and the fact that large organizations like Meta are able to now take the companies that are developing spyware and nation state cyber warfare tools and bring them to court and make them divulge their toolings and things of that nature in their source code is going to be a step forward. I agree completely. This is moving in a very interesting and fruitful direction. But again, NSO Group's also not the only one that plays in this space. There are a number of other tools that tend to market themselves as maybe like a law enforcement or investigative tool, but oftentimes are used against marginalized individuals.
Yeah, it's in many cases these kinds of things are illegal until the government or until a government is doing it. Right,
Yeah.
a government group would view these things as illegal until they want to do it themselves. And we've seen this in the past, right, with state developed hacking tools that make their way out into the wild, and then become large news stories. And are terrible travesties. But it would have continued unchecked had the public never known about it. So it is interesting that these are happening from kind of private groups like NSO Group, or like Intellexa Alliance is another group that is mentioned inside this story on the Hacker News. That these groups are private groups, and then they are essential. I mean, they're operating the same way that the ransomware as a service groups operate, right? Like they're willing to
Almost, yeah.
the highest bidder, no questions asked, probably, that you like this kind of like, oh, if you want to use this, like, yeah, absolutely go for it. Just don't do these few things. And but once they have the software, once they have the ability to use it, it's in their hands. They can do with it what they will. Now I'm gonna switch up the order a little bit because we're already talking about Facebook here.
Okay.
So we're gonna jump to our next story here, which is again concerning Meta. Um, this one's coming to us from Engadget, uh, and I think actually dovetails kind of interestingly with the last story. Right, in the last story, people were taking over WhatsApp or putting spyware into WhatsApp accounts, which is a group owned by Meta, and essentially taking access to those accounts and to those numbers. But in the opposite side of that same coin, where Meta cared very deeply about this, there is a new kind of open letter that has been published, I believe, by 41 state attorney generals who are asking Meta to please fix their support for victims who have been hacked. The quote, the key pull quote here being, "We refuse to operate as the customer service representatives of your company." Yeah, crazy.
So, first off, if any of our viewers have ever had one of their social media accounts, more specifically, probably like a Facebook account, compromised at one point or another, which, look, it happens to a lot of people. This is a regular occurrence. How hard was it to get your account back? I've had to deal with this, not personally, but for friends and family of mine. And even the article goes out to say that individuals have had to resort to hiring legal or even potentially other ethical hackers to get back into their accounts. And so from my experience, having lived this for friends and family, as I mentioned, it is absolutely treacherous to regain access to a Meta or Facebook account. There's just a number of problems with the automated systems, the cycles. There's nobody to call. There's nobody to email. Oftentimes, I found my trick to have a friend that works at Facebook or Meta. And that's simply because I have a personal relationship, aka backdoor to the company, and sometimes I still can't even get the success to get these accounts back for my loved ones. So it's really challenging, and so for me, having lived this and seen it with others, clearly it's gotten the attention of some high-profile individuals within government to say, if you expect people to feel comfortable on your platform, if you're profiting off of them, but you're providing zero support when a security incident happens, you really need to get your act together, especially because, and I was actually talking to somebody earlier about this week, is that not everybody understands this, but social media is sometimes the only form of communication most individuals may have with their friends and family. And when one of these platforms goes out, it can be devastating as far as communication and being able to reach out to their loved ones and other individuals.
Well, and on top of that, there's currently there's been a long kind of legal battle in the federal government, right, around social media companies and trying to ban particular social media companies or restrict certain companies from operating in certain ways. And something that comes up a lot is the fact that these days, if you just take away certain aspects of social media, or you get rid of social media platforms altogether, or you just have the ability to take away someone's account, a lot of people's livelihood is tied to this now, right? Not just like influencer kind of people, but the fact that like a lot of people run their small businesses through these groups and pages. And so with Facebook in particular, right, Facebook was one of the original social media platforms to roll out like business functionality, and losing access to your business page where you're also selling your goods or booking your services, right, can be hugely detrimental, especially if that person takes it over and starts using your page to post terrible things as a way to try and incentivize you to get it back. Now, something that's interesting here as well is that you mentioned like, hey, getting an account back, having a friend at Facebook, right, was your back path, your backdoor into getting that back. And then you mentioned that some people even go as far as to hire ethical hackers or bring outside services in to do this. And what is really interesting is it wasn't that long ago. I think it was just a couple of years ago that Meta ended up disciplining and firing over 20 workers for accessing users' Facebook accounts and taking over Facebook accounts. And as part of that, something that came out is that their policy actually expressly forbids you from paying for account recovery services. So, people,
Market it, man.
right? Like they expressly forbid you from getting like ethical hackers or anything like that to get your account back for you and pay them. But along with this story, I can't find a specific like news mention of it as I'm trying to Google it right now. But I do remember anecdotally, right, also hearing about Facebook employees who were charging people to say like, hey, if your account got taken over or stolen from you, give me some money, I can get it back because I work at Facebook. And who are also disciplined for that. I can't find the exact stories on it, and it might have just been anecdotal stuff related to this story. But yeah, it is very interesting, right, to see now states stepping up and saying, hey, this happens frequently enough and people come to us frequently enough to report this. We cannot be their only action. The only way that they get any kind of resolution is if you get a legal letter from one of us. This takes up valuable state resources, groups that are already tragically underfunded and stretched incredibly thin. Right, having them be responsible for this, it just is not a tenable situation. It's not something that can last for much longer. And so these 41 state attorneys general have come together. 41 state attorneys general, by the way, is a significant portion of the state attorneys general, have come together to demand from the chief law officer at Facebook, hey, the chief legal officer at Facebook, hey, you have to step up your account recovery support network and support system because we can no longer bear the brunt of this. Very interesting, right, to see those two sides to Facebook and Meta here as they are taking an outside group to court to stop account takeovers and stop spyware, but also on the flip side, right, being told by courts or by legal entities, you have to do better at this. And it'll be really interesting to see that progress.
I want to make it clear that I cannot help people get back into their Facebook accounts.
Do not reach out to Jonathan for help getting back into your Facebook accounts.
You want to blast through this last story? You want me to kind of jump into some of this?
Please. This one's really fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
So everybody get your flippers out. We're going to do this next lesson on how to set up a phishing attack. Well, more specifically, a story coming to us from Bleeping Computer talks about a number of Tesla theoretical scenarios in which setting up, first off, an access point for free Wi-Fi, maybe like a charging station, and then setting up fake Tesla authentication pages on those free Wi-Fis to encourage users while they're sitting there watching their Netflix, whatever they do in their cars these days, and stealing credentials. So they'll put in maybe their username and password, and furthermore, even that one-time code that's text messaged out. And once all those credentials are stolen, which again, what seems to be, hey, here's free Wi-Fi for being a Tesla owner, this data is now in the hands of nefarious players. One of the challenges, though, coming again, classical phishing, fake access points, stuff like that's been around for a while. What's new is being able to do kinds of things like that on platforms as small as a flipper or a tablet. But on the Tesla side of the house, more recent versions of their software are not sending out any kind of notifications when there's major changes happening, including those digital keys that allow you to use the app to operate the car, right? That's what we're seeing here.
Right. Yeah. So what's happening there is setting up that fake SSID right locally at something like a Tesla charging station. Now you've mentioned Flipper Zero. Flipper Zero has been in the legal circuit for a little bit now. Right, Canada is considering banning them entirely. Some various U.S. states have also put forward legislation. But the point is, it's not just a Flipper Zero. It's a Raspberry Pi. It's an Android phone. It's anything. Right, I could do this just with my phone right here. Yeah. But they are setting up these SSIDs at places like Tesla charging stations. The owner goes to log into it. They get a page that says log in with your credentials, and then it asks for the one-time password that they immediately grab, right? So they use those credentials to try and log into the app. They immediately send that one-time password request to the owner of the Tesla. The Tesla owner puts that into this fake login page. They grab that and turn around to the Tesla app right away. And then they authenticate their phone as a Tesla key. The point here being that there is no real authentication. It just requires that the phone be near the Tesla in order for this to work. It doesn't require that the car already be unlocked. So if an owner were to step out of their car, lock it, and walk away to sit down at a bench or something like that. So it doesn't require that the car be unlocked. It doesn't require that the phone be in the car at the time of this happening, which would be another security step.
Meters, I think they were saying. So general vicinity.
Just being in the general vicinity of the car is all that you need to do this. But like you mentioned, critically, there is then no notification sent to the Tesla owner that a new key has been added for their car. Now, if you're within a few meters of the car and you're adding a new key to it and it's at a charging station, right, by the time someone gets a notification and looks at it and says, I didn't add a new key, you've probably already gotten into the car and started to drive off, right? But if you were doing this for bulk, to be able to say, well, I now control 40 Teslas, right? That then you're doing this across the course of a day. A notification would go a long way for someone to be able to go in and say, remove all these keys that aren't the one that I have added myself. Interestingly, these researchers did go to Tesla and say, hey, this is what's happening. This lacks proper authentication security. But Tesla defined the report to be out of scope because it is functioning as intended. Would be my
guess. A feature, not a bug.
It's a feature, not a bug. So that's a very interesting story coming from Bleeping Computer. Again, these types of things are going to become more and more common as we see more and more technology, right? Or cars shifting towards technology. In fact, right, like we discussed last week, the Biden administration has put out new guidance on looking into how cars exactly function and what kind of technology is being added and how that could be impacted by foreign adversaries and what they might do with that information. Also this week, I saw that the European Union's vehicle safety organization is putting out a call to return to physical buttons in cars and saying that touch screens have taken over too much of the car interface and they are too distracting and they are not functional enough and they're increasing the amount of accidents. And so I would not be surprised if as man-in-the-middle attacks like this pop up and we see more things like this, probably more legislation and more legal requirements around things like, secondary key methods and using your phones and stuff like that. But we are already over time. We should probably just expand the time slot of the show at this point because we have so much more to say. Yeah. But thank you so much for joining us for GPS Live for the week of March 8th. March 8th. March 8th. For some reason, I got confused there for a second. Thank you so much for joining us for the week of March 8th for GPS Live. If you've been joining us live, thank you so much for the time. If you're watching this on demand, again, thank you so much. Let us know what you thought of the stories, and we will jump into those comments and see if there's anything that we can pull in for next week's show. Again, next week is going to be a special week again because the Grit Report is coming out, so we will have members of the Grit team here to discuss the findings and to discuss what's going on in ransomware. But until then, I have been and will continue to be Tristan Morris.
And I am Jonathan Singer.
And we will see you next time.